Hey everyone, so this is my quiz review for quiz 2. I decided to do this question, which is on my quiz, was question number 11. Look up the following case. Linkis, I think that's how you pronounce it, v. Lane, 276, Southwestern 3rd edition, page 917 in the Tennessee Court of Appeals, the year 2008. It tells us to skim through the opinion. And then Linkis, why did the plaintiffs lose? So we have options. Um, we have these options. The plaintiffs lost because the jailers had no duty to protect the inmate. The plaintiffs lost because the jailer's breach was not the proximate cause of the inmate's injury. The plaintiffs lost because the jailers could not have anticipated what the inmate did. And the plaintiffs lost because the inmate's injuries were self-inflicted. So I went into Westlaw, of course, put in the jurisdiction Tennessee. For the purposes of this case, of this video, I just copied and pasted the citation, and I came up with the case. And so, for the background, a widow of the descendant who committed suicide in the county jail brought a wrongful death action against the county. If we scroll down into the opinion, I believe it's on here, starting here, it says Deputy Simpson last saw Mr. Linkis alive at approximately 1:35 a.m. on April 17, 2004. Deputy Gibson last saw Mr. Linkis alive a few minutes before 2 a.m. on April 17, 2004. During both observations, Mr. Linkis appeared to be resting. Deputy Gibson next observed Mr. Linkis at approximately 2:12 a.m., at which point he had hung himself by a telephone cord attached to the wall of the visitation area. Mr. Linkis was dead. Mr. Linkis had no known history of suicidal thoughts or actions. He expressed no suicidal ideation, and he had no known history of mental illness. We scroll down here. It says there is no genuine issue as to any material facts surrounding the circumstances presented by Mr. Linkis' arrest and incarceration at the Hawkins County Jail. There has been no proof that Mr. Linkis' self-destructive actions were foreseeable. Hawkins County did not breach a duty to Mr. Linkis to protect him from self-injury because his self-destructive acts were not reasonably foreseeable. Hawkins County deputies followed their policy and procedures by regularly observing Mr. Linkis. No one observed any abnormal behavior, such as to warrant or a more intense level of scrutiny beyond the approximately every 30-minute observations that were conducted. So, based off that information, the plaintiffs lost because the jailers had no duty to protect the inmate. This would not be true because the jailers had no duty to protect the inmate. They did not have a duty to protect the inmate. The plaintiff lost because the jailer's breach was not the proximate cause of the inmate's injury. That is not true. Their breach was not the proximate cause of the inmate's injury because his self-destruction actions were not foreseeable, and there was no proof that his actions were foreseeable. And the plaintiffs lost because the inmate's injuries were self-inflicted. It doesn't bring that out in the case. Just because he killed himself doesn't necessarily mean, that's the reason why the plaintiff lost in this appeal. And jailers, I'm guessing that is the prison officials. So if that's the case, for this one, they did have a duty to protect the inmate, but because they did not foresee his actions and they didn't find any reason for any abnormal behavior to warrant a more intense level of scrutiny, then of course they wouldn't have known. And so I decided to go with the plaintiff's loss because the jailers could not have anticipated what the inmate did. Because again, in the case we see here, that there had been no proof that Mr. Lincoln's self-destructive actions were foreseeable. Mr. Lincoln's the Hawkins County did not breach a duty to Mr. Lincoln to protect from self-injury because his self-destructive acts were not reasonably foreseeable. And no one observed any abnormal behavior, such as warrant a more intense level of scrutiny. And so again, they couldn't have guessed, or they had no reason to they had no reason again to increase their observations of him because he didn't show any signs of suicidal thoughts, any signs of depression, any signs that could cause someone to actually kill themselves. Okay, so thank you.